The carpfish are a freshwater
species native to Central Asia. They have been introduced and farmed, however, in other parts of the world, where they are now spread across all parts of Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. The species have been particularly successful in Europe, where they are a common angling fish. This trait was particularly desirable to Australians, and the carpfish was deliberately introduced into Australia in an attempt to imitate the European environment. It is unclear of the first stocking of the carp in Australia. However, it is believed that it could have been as early as the 1860s, with the first of them being cultured in Sydney in 1908. In Australia, the carp are a pest species, and they have brought many negative effects to the Australian ecosystem since their introduction. The carp now make up a whopping 90% of the fish biomass in the Murray-Darling Basin alone. So what exactly are the impacts of the European carp in Australia? Reduced water quality. The carpfish will uproot the vegetation in waterways when feeding. When the carp is feeding, it will suck up sediments, separate the materials, and eject unwanted matter back into the water in a process called roiling. This process causes sediments to mix with the water and in turn makes the water turbid. High turbidity can have many detrimental effects on the water as it reduces light penetration necessary for plant growth, which in turn will cause higher levels of CO2 and a decrease in wildlife that feeds on the plant material. This reduction of light can also affect fish and the animals that rely on vision when searching for food. As well as this, suspended materials can clog fish gills or smother plants, causing many native species to die. The carp, however, can survive in many harsh environments, so they will continue to reproduce in these waters. An increase in algal blooms. The carp causes this increase through preying on animals that eat algae such as zooplankton, as well as stirring up the nutrients in the water when feeding. Predation. Carp will commonly eat zooplankton in the water, but have also been observed to predate upon larger macroinvertebrates, small fish, and fish eggs. Herbivory. The carp destroys many of the native plants in the waterways through their grazing and feeding behaviours. This causes a huge loss in biodiversity and abundance of plants, destroying food source and breeding grounds for many native species. Disease. As the carp are an invasive species, it is believed that they brought many diseases from foreign waters to the Australian habitat, causing biodiversity loss and habitat degradation. It has become extremely evident that the invasive carpfish has had detrimental effects on the Australian ecosystem. Due to their huge numbers in the all-important Murray-Darling Basin, action needs to be taken to attempt to save our waters. So what is being done? The carpfish have now been added to the Australian pest list with identification keys so that people can recognise the species. Action already undertaken includes recreational public fishing events, the installation of carp separation cages, and the draining of private water bodies to eliminate the species. However, further actions such as poisoning, the introduction of disease, or physical traps are still illegal in Australia. However, more needs to be done to eliminate the species before we are completely overpopulated. With further public recognition and action undertaken, we can finally get mercy for the Murray-Darling Basin.